What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's going on with the overall market and talk about some very important levels to watch for. I'm also going to talk about some important supports to watch for in case these levels break, and what's going on with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. But before I break anything down about all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am personally not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends very soon, ends in just about 9 days, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with the overall market. SPY is currently down about 0.06%, kind of flat as of right now, but there are still some signs of weakness on the 4-hour, and we're going to be watching this all very, very carefully. We're also going to be watching Tesla and all these other tickers as we're starting to see some big momentum shifts. I want to break down the news first before I break down more information about the charts. Starting us off right here, at the very top, we're seeing futures are quite flat so far. We're seeing some news about the UAW strikes that have been going on. These are very important, at least for many of these major car companies out there, especially Ford and GM. Not affecting Tesla to the same extent, but this will be very, very important based off their proposals and what ends up getting settled. Moving forward, I just wanted to mention that we're starting to see more and more talk about the streaming industry taking over the TV industry, or at least the traditional TV industry, as consumers are shifting. And there's been some talk about how Disney is even considering selling ABC and its own affiliates. That's very, very interesting. Besides that, we're starting to see some new news about New York cracking down on short-term rentals. So that's making the headlines right now for the markets. Nothing else too crazy, at least for the weekend. For today, I just want to remind you all that we have some housing data coming out. We have the NAHB Housing Market Index. This is coming out at about 10 o'clock a.m. today. And this is expected to fall about 50 points, or I'm sorry, 250 in August of 2023. And it was like 56 before. Now, this is going to be important. This is going to give us a gauge for the current single family home sales. As this drops, this is going to be likely because of the higher mortgage rates and etc. So we're going to be watching this carefully. This could cause some small volatility for the markets. Besides that, there's like basically nothing too big until like Wednesday, until we have the FOMC meeting. All right, anyways, let's break down the charts. How are things looking? So on SPY, I just want to mention that we have this 443 support. There's some support at 443 and also at 442 flat. That this entire zone right here is acting as support. We're going to be watching that very carefully. If it breaks, as the market's looking weak so far, right, we have this trend line of support right here, very close to this 440 level, and I do expect 440 to be tested if we end up breaking below 442. So that's going to be a very, very critical support. And if we do test this 440 area, we should try to base around here. It would be very crazy if we ended up breaking 440, because the next critical support is going to be around like 436 if that breaks. But what I'm going to be talking about for now would be like the expected move. If we break 442, we're going to be watching 440 being tested. As of right now, we're trying to hold above 443, but we're looking weak on the 4-hour. So I would be very, very careful. If we try to bounce a little bit, you're going to be watching 444 as critical resistance, not to mention 445 on SPY. What is more likely? Well, right now, I just want to note that the market is trying its best to hold 443 as of right now. It's just barely holding on. We'll see if this holds or not, if we could try to get some kind of balance. We may end up failing because the 4-hour is looking kind of bearish right now. And also the 30 minutes time frame is looking kind of weak. So we're kind of mixed. We're just kind of shopping around this area in the pre-market. So we're going to be watching this intraday to see if we break below 443. If we do so, 442 flat is going to be our support. And below that, we have 440, then 436. We are looking kind of flat, a little weaker as of right now in the morning. So we're going to be watching this all very carefully. We are looking more weaker as of right now. For Tesla, we have resistance at about, well, Tesla's actually dropping, is actually down about 0.9% in the pre-market. But we also have resistance around this 272.5 area, not to mention 273.56, 274, 275, and then 278 as resistance levels. For support, you're going to be watching, so Tesla's currently at about, let's see, 271.8. So if Tesla continues to break down, we have 271 as support, 270 flat, 268 and then 266 as supports. They're all like very tight levels. 266 is really the most important one. If that breaks for Tesla, there's a risk of Tesla sinking a lot lower. Now, one thing I mentioned in my previous video was that Tesla could either start dropping from where it's at, or we could get a bounce and then start dropping. Those were like the two possibilities. It depended on if we ended up forming like a triple bearish divergence on the news, or if we failed to do so, and this divergence that formed the bearish divergence was it for Tesla to start downtrending. Right now, it's looking like Tesla may start downtrending. It doesn't look like it's going to bounce too hard unless we get some good news by the time we open. As of right now, it's looking weaker, so be very careful with Tesla. And don't forget to watch 270, 268, and 266 as key supports. If 266 breaks on Tesla, there's a risk of it coming down harder. We have this big gap way down below here, so you're going to be watching that very carefully. For Nvda is looking relatively weak. We were talking about Nvidia potentially dropping into like the 425 area. It looks very, very weak right now. I was hoping we would get some kind of like balance first and then this thing could start dropping, but instead it's just continuing to drop. We also broke down the possibility of this just continuing to sink. But as of right now, there's not much of a balance. We're not really getting much of a pop on it, so it's looking very, very, very weak. I want to look at the 4-hour to just double check this trend. So the 4-hour looks very bearish on Nvidia. We're currently at 427, which has some support, but 425 is going to be critical, not to mention 420, and we're continuing to fall pretty hard as Nvidia is looking relatively weak. So we're going to be waiting for the housing numbers to come out. We'll see if that causes any volatility at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. And besides that, I just want to note that Nvidia is looking weak. We're going to be watching this 427 support. Could this thing hold or not? If it does try to hold, we could see this thing try to make its way back up to this 430 area. 436 could be a possibility above that, but it's still looking very weak. It doesn't look like it's going to bounce that much. And being at this like 427 zone, we're going to be watching it potentially come down to 425 if that ends up breaking. 420 below that, 416 are going to be some targets if Nvidia continues to break down. Because once again, we have this previous resistance right here, which is acting as our support zone. So like right about here, this 427 zone, like right here. Not to mention these previous levels right here, which are going to be acting as supports, 416, 420, not to mention 425. So you're going to be watching Nvidia. It looks weak right now. I want to warn everyone about that. Please be very careful. And with that said, we're going to talk about Aapl. Aapl is not looking that great. It's kind of, I think it's trying to rebound just a tiny bit. We were talking about this potentially happening, but it's not that great of a rebound. We drew it out like this. At least for the pre-market session, getting this rebound like this. But the problem with Aapl would be when you zoom out, we still have this head and shoulders that is valid, and it's still on a downtrend. It's making lower highs and lower lows technically still. It made an attempt to gap up on Friday, but it failed, so it's looking kind of weak still. We're going to be watching to see if this thing can get very close to this 276 zone. This is the zone we were talking about yesterday. We actually are very close to it. We're going to see if we can try to break above 176.5. I think I said 2 instead. Sorry about that, guys. So 176.5, we're going to be watching this. If Aapl manages to hold this, it could start pushing. If it breaks this high, then it could push for 178 if we manage to break the high right here. But so far, Apple's looking kind of weak. We're going to be watching 176.5 very carefully. If it rejects off this 176 zone and starts selling off a bit, it could just kind of trade sideways a bit, approaching FOMC around this 174 to 176 zone, and we could just see some sideways price action before this thing begins to sink. Last but not least, for the QQQ, this is also looking a little bit weak right now. You guys can see it's currently at support at this 368 zone. So 368 to 369 is where we have the support. If this fails on the triple Q, it's going to sink all the way down to this imbalance towards this 366 area. That's going to be a key level. If 366 fails this too, then we have like 362 potentially coming. It's looking weak right now, so we're going to be watching 368 very carefully. We want to see if this thing could hold because we did get a historical bounce off this area. If it does bounce, 370, 372 are going to be two important support zones. I'm sorry, resistance zones. So we're going to be watching it very carefully. We're currently sitting at support on the QQQ. Watch 368 to 369. If 368 breaks, it's going to sink to 366. If it manages to bounce off here, then 370 is going to be resistance, not to mention 372 is going to be the next like more significant resistance above that. So those are some important levels. It is looking weak right now. Let's just double check the 4-hour MACD. The last time I checked it, was looking kind of weak as the VIX is kind of like pumping. The market's still selling off too. So right now, we just want to be open-minded. We want to be open-minded to anything. The 30 minutes about to get a bearish cross, and we have some weak looking 30-minute candles on the QQQ. It's looking a little weak, and the 4-hour is also looking weak right now, so there's a risk of more downside. We could see this thing start to sink. So just be very careful, especially thanks to Nvda and Tesla selling off. Do what you have to do, guys, and I'll see you guys very soon. So take care, market to the moon, because the long term is still incredibly bright, and peace out.